Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I was halfway through a glass of sparkling rose when it happened. My cousin Mara stood up in her off-the-shoulder rehearsal dinner dress, clinking her glass like she was the star of a rom-com. "Everyone, I just want to introduce my favorite cousin," she said, smiling wide and too sweetly. "This is Soraya, our forever romantic, the single one who never really moved on." The words landed like a slap dressed in lace. People chuckled. A few leaned in, curious, like they were about to hear a juicy story. Someone even raised their eyebrows in that "oh, here we go" kind of way. I laughed too, politely, because that's what you do when your family roasts you like it's part of the entertainment. Behind Mara, her fiancé Caleb winced. Caught it just a flicker, but it was there. He knew she'd crossed a line. My mom, Jeanette, gave me that look. Half apologetic, half "why didn't you just bring a date like I told you?" My sister Ivy reached under the table and squeezed my hand. Her diamond wedding ring scratched against my skin. I said nothing, just smiled, nodded, and felt every set of eyes on me like stage lights. Then Caleb cleared his throat. All right, he said, trying to move things along. "Let's keep the roast light, folks. And now before dessert, my best man would like to say a few words." Chairs shifted, forks clinked, the mood shifted. I turned, curious who he meant, and then I saw him. Nikiko Valen, the best man. Tall, quiet, effortlessly composed, wearing a navy suit like it was tailored for him. He stepped forward from the back of the room, his glass raised. The sound of chatter dimmed, like the whole room instinctively knew something was about to happen. And then he said my name out loud, clear. "Soraya." Every head turned. Every jaw slowly, silently dropped. In that moment, I didn't know what he was about to say. I didn't know if I was going to be humiliated again or if something entirely different was coming. All I knew was that the air shifted. He was looking at me, not around the room, not at Mara or Caleb, but at me. And suddenly, I wasn't just the girl who never moved on. I was something else entirely. I hadn't wanted to come to the wedding. I told my mom I had a work deadline, told Ivy I felt a cold coming on, told myself it would be too weird, too soon, too everything. But the RSVP had been sent months ago, back when Ethan and I were still a thing, before I found that text on his phone, before 3 years of planning a life together ended with me packing up his hoodie and toothbrush and dropping them off in a paper bag on his porch. So no, I didn't want to come, but I did because I'm polite, because Mara is family, and because if I didn't show up, I knew I'd never hear the end of it. The wedding was being held at a vineyard in upstate New York, the kind with fairy lights strung between oak trees and a view so perfect it felt scripted. I drove up alone in my 10-year-old Honda, playing an old playlist Ethan had made, then switching it off halfway through. I realized my jaw was clenched by the time I pulled into the parking lot. I'd already told myself 3 things. Smile, don't drink too much, leave early. Inside the rehearsal dinner, everything was warm and golden. Candles flickered, soft jazz played, and the room buzzed with the kind of chatter that comes with open bars and new dresses. I recognized everyone and felt invisible all at once. My mother, Jeanette, found me immediately. She air-kissed my cheek and stepped back, inspecting me like I was a dress she wasn't sure she liked anymore. "You look good," she said, adjusting my necklace even though it didn't need adjusting. "But couldn't you have worn something with color? You always wear black." "It's navy." Still, then came my sister, Ivy, glowing in her newlywed confidence. She hugged me, genuinely happy, her pink lipstick leaving a perfect mark on my cheek. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I came." She gave me a sympathetic smile, the kind you give someone you think is still broken. I didn't correct her. Let them all think what they wanted. Uncle Russ called out from across the table. "Soraya, you still living in that little apartment? Still writing about books instead of writing one?" He laughed and everyone laughed. I nodded. Yep, still turning commas into paychecks. Mara floated in not long after, already basking in bride energy. She wore white, obviously, even though it wasn't the wedding day yet. When she saw me, her eyes lit up, but not with kindness, with mischief. "My favorite cousin," she chirped, pulling me into a hug. "Look at you, still single, still gorgeous. We're keeping your name in rotation for the bouquet toss. Obviously." I forced a laugh. I'd always had this kind of relationship with Mara. Competitive, tight-lipped, full of tension. Neither of us ever acknowledged it. She was the type who always needed to win, even in family group chats. Behind her, Caleb, her fiancé, gave me a small kind smile. Caleb had always been decent. We once bonded over a shared hatred of wedding planning apps. "How have you been?" he asked quietly as Mara flitted away. "I'm good," I replied. He tilted his head. "Are you really?" I shrugged. "Good enough." He didn't push, I appreciated that. The rehearsal dinner was a blur of place cards, wine refills, and bad toasts. I sat at the singles table, of course, next to a guy named Grant who claimed we met back in the day and said we should catch up later. Ivy leaned over once to whisper, "We can leave together if it gets weird." It was already weird. Being back with my extended family felt like stepping into a museum of who I used to be. Everyone still treated me like I was 25 and madly in love, like I hadn't aged, grown, or learned how to put myself back together after being left. They meant well, most of them, but their sympathy clung to me like perfume, strong, sticky, and not quite right. Still, I smiled, I made small talk, I passed the mashed potatoes and said things like, "So exciting," and "You must be thrilled," and "What a beautiful dress." I did what I'd come to do, survive it. And then, just when I thought I could fade quietly into the background for the rest of the night, Mara stood up and said the thing that cracked the evening open like a dropped glass of champagne. "This is Sarah, our forever romantic, the single one who never really moved on." That's when I laughed, that's when people giggled, and that's when Caleb looked toward the back of the room and said, "Now my best friend Nico would like to say a few words." My heart did something strange then, not quite a jump, more like a jolt, the kind your body does when you realize something important is about to happen and nothing you do can stop it. I turned and I saw him. Nico Valen. Suddenly, I wasn't sure if I should stay seated or run out the back door. I hadn't seen Nico in 14 years, not in person anyway. Once, maybe 6 years ago, I saw his name pop up on a mutual friend's wedding registry. I clicked on it, heart pounding, but it led to nothing, no photos, no updates, just a name on a list. I told myself it didn't matter. Now, here he was in the flesh, walking toward the front of the room with a calmness I didn't trust. He didn't look exactly how I remembered. His jaw was more defined, his frame broader, his hair was shorter than it used to be, darker too. But his eyes, the way they scanned the room and landed on mine, those hadn't changed. Nico was never supposed to be here. Caleb never mentioned him. Not once, not during any family gathering, not in a single Instagram tag. I'd assumed they'd lost touch. Or maybe Caleb assumed I wouldn't show up and thought there was no harm in inviting him. Nico took the mic from the DJ and tapped it once. "Evening," he said. His voice low, steady, a little deeper than I remembered. "I won't keep you long." Caleb asked me to speak, and when Caleb asks, you say yes, even when it terrifies you. A few chuckles from the crowd. I didn't laugh. I was frozen. Not afraid exactly, but on edge, like something in my body recognized his presence before my brain could process it. He didn't look at me again, not yet, but I knew he would.
I glænst af Ivy, her brevfuret.
She leaned in and whispered, "Wait, is that Nico?" I gave the tiniest nod. Her eyes widened. "That Nico?" I nodded again. She mouthed one word. "Wow." I tried to focus on the speech. It was simple enough. Nico told a few funny stories about Caleb in college, dropped a sweet memory from high school, then raised his glass and toasted to forever kinds of love. I could feel my mother watching me. I didn't turn to confirm it. When the applause faded and Nico handed the mic back, he looked at me again, this time directly. A pause, deliberate, like he was testing the water. I looked away first. After the speeches, people moved toward the dessert table. Conversations picked back up, but I stayed in my seat, staring at my untouched slice of cake, willing myself not to feel anything. Then I heard his voice behind me. "Hey!" I turned. There he was, closer than I expected. Still holding his champagne, still watching me like I was someone he remembered. "Nico," I said, and hated the way my voice cracked on the second syllable. He smiled faintly. "You remember me? You gave a toast 2 minutes ago. Would have been hard to forget." Still sharp, I see. I stood up, brushing non-existent crumbs off my dress. "What are you doing here?" "Caleb's best man," he said. "Been planning it for months. You didn't think I might be here. I didn't think I'd get the chance to talk to you." Honestly, I didn't reply. I didn't have a good answer ready. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say to him, to anyone. My head was spinning. He looked around the room, then back at me. You look good. You don't get to say that. I know. Another pause. You disappeared, I said. You kissed me, then left for college and never spoke to me again. I know, he repeated. I've wanted to explain that for a long time. Well, your timing sucks. He actually laughed, but it wasn't smug, it was quiet sad. Yeah, it really does. I didn't trust this version of him, calm, thoughtful, present. He used to be impulsive and wild, the kind of guy who ran barefoot across rooftops just to watch the sunrise, the kind of guy who said he'd write and then didn't. He stepped a little closer. I'm not here to make things harder, I swear. But I meant what I said in the speech. Some things stick with you even when you think they shouldn't. I looked away. I'm not who I was back then. I'm counting on that. I excused myself, needing air. I stepped outside into the cool evening, the vineyard lit in soft yellow lights. The air smelled like jasmine and wine in early fall. And for the first time all night, I didn't know how to keep pretending I was fine. Inside, people were laughing, dancing, toasting to love and second chances. I leaned against the railing and took a shaky breath. The past had just walked back into my life, wearing a suit and telling the truth, and I didn't know what to do with any of it. I stayed outside longer than I meant to. The vineyard was quiet under a navy sky, stars just starting to show. The music from the reception hall spilled out in soft waves, an old Etta James song floating through the open doors. I could hear laughter, the scrape of forks on plates, the occasional clink of a champagne glass being raised. I should have gone home, that was my plan. Leave before cake, avoid the slow dance songs, text Ivy that I had a headache and dip out while no one noticed. That was the safe option. Instead, I stood there gripping the railing, asking myself one impossible question. What if I didn't run this time? Behind me, the door creaked open. You okay? Ivy stepped out, holding 2 glasses of wine. She handed me one and leaned on the railing beside me. I'm not crying if that's what you came to check. She smiled gently. That's not what I came to check. We stood there quietly for a minute. You could talk to him, she said. I already did. I mean, really talk to him. I took a sip of the wine. I remember what he did. I remember that he was 19, scared and stupid. We all were. I also remember how you looked at him, Sarah. Back then, you were different around him, lighter. That version of me doesn't exist anymore. Ivy raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? I didn't answer, mostly because I wasn't. She bumped my shoulder. You don't owe him anything, but maybe you owe yourself a little honesty. When she went back inside, I stood alone for a while longer. I thought about the version of myself I'd been when Nico and I were almost something. It had been a single night, a kiss that should have been followed by 100 more. But then he left and I waited, and then I stopped waiting and pretended I didn't care. Now he was here and he was saying things I never thought I'd hear. I set down the glass and turned back toward the building. I didn't go in through the main entrance. I slipped through the side, past the staff hallway, and found myself at the edge of the room, half in shadow, scanning for him. He was standing by the fireplace alone, hands in his pockets, staring into the flames like he was working up the courage to move. I crossed the room and stopped a few feet from him. You said you wanted to explain, I said. He turned slowly. He didn't look surprised. I do, he said. If you'll let me.
I'm listening.
Nico took a breath. I left for college and I thought about you every single day after I did. I had your number. I even wrote out what I wanted to say a dozen different times, but every time I went to call, I panicked. I'd never felt anything that real before. I didn't think I deserved it. That doesn't make what you did okay. I know it doesn't. And now, after all this time, you show up and give a speech like something out of a movie. I didn't plan the speech, he said. I wrote something else, something safe, but then I saw you and everything I planned felt hollow. He paused. I'm not trying to rewrite the past, Soraya. I just want to stop pretending it didn't mean something. I crossed my arms. You could have reached out years ago. I know, he said, and I wish I had. But I'm here now, and if there's even a chance that you've wondered just once what it could have been like if I'd stayed, I had to say something. I studied him, the nervous shift in his stance, the sincerity in his voice, the part of him that looked like the boy I used to dream about and the man I didn't quite recognize. I could have shut him down. I still wasn't sure I wanted to forgive him, but I wasn't ready to walk away either. All right, I said quietly. You get 10 minutes outside, then I go home. He didn't smile, but something in his face softened like relief. I'll take 10, he said. We walked out together, past dancing relatives and second glasses of wine, and Aunt Cecily pointing at us like she predicted this all along. Outside, under the lights, we sat on the bench near the vineyard path, and for the first time in 14 years, I let myself listen, not as the girl he left behind, but as the woman who finally wanted to know why we sat on that bench, the two of us beneath strings of lights and a sky thick with stars. It smelled like grapevine and wood smoke. I could still hear the faint pulse of bass from the dance floor. But out here the world felt quieter, slower, real. Nico didn't rush into his explanation. He sat beside me like someone who had finally stopped running from the past, from guilt, maybe even from himself. I didn't leave because I didn't feel anything, he said. I left because I felt too much. I didn't respond. When I kissed you that night, I knew it was different, he continued. I knew if I stayed, I wouldn't be able to focus on anything else, and that scared me. I was a kid, Soraya. I didn't know how to carry something that real. You didn't even say goodbye. I know, he said, his voice low. That's the part that haunts me. I looked at him, then really looked. He wasn't trying to charm his way back in. He wasn't giving me a version of the truth that would make him look good. He was laying it out there, unsure of what I'd do with it. I let out a breath. I waited for you, for a while. I checked my phone every day. He nodded. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No, I said. You don't. The words hung between us, and then I added, but maybe you're not here for forgiveness. His eyes met mine. I'm here for honesty, and maybe if I'm lucky, a second chance. I wasn't ready to answer that, not yet, but I didn't move away from him. Back inside, someone tapped on a glass. Music cut off, the crowd quieted. It was Caleb standing with a microphone. Before we head into the dancing portion of the night, I just want to say thank you to everyone who made it out here, especially my best man, who's been my friend since we were 15 and who apparently had a few extra things to say. The crowd chuckled. Now, against all wedding tradition and maybe some advice from my bride, Nico wants to say one more thing. My heart jumped. Nico turned to me. Do you mind? I stared at him. Are you serious? He stood, straightened his jacket, and offered a helpless crooked smile. Too late to back out now. He walked inside and I followed. The room was buzzing, half curiosity, half anticipation. Nico took the mic from Caleb and stood beneath the low lights with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. Hi again, he began, scanning the room. Some of you know me. Most of you probably don't, but I'm not here to talk about Caleb this time. A few murmurs. I want to talk about someone else, someone I never got to say goodbye to, someone I walked away from thinking I was doing the smart thing, protecting myself, avoiding mess. But what I really did was lose the best thing that ever happened to me before it even had a chance to become real. My hands felt numb, my cheeks burned. Every single person turned to look at me. He didn't say my name, not yet, but I could feel it on his tongue. There's this myth that time heals everything, that if you leave something alone long enough it stops hurting, but that's not always true. Sometimes it just sits quietly waiting, and when you finally face it, you realize it never stopped mattering. He glanced across the room, our eyes locked. I don't want to be the guy who runs anymore, he said. Not from love, not from regret, not from the people I've hurt. And if the person I'm talking about can hear me right now, I want her to know she changed me, and I'm standing here tonight because I want a second chance. Even if all I get is a conversation, I'll take it. Silence. No awkward laughter, no nervous chatter, just an entire room holding its breath. Aunt Cicely dropped her fork. Ivy leaned forward in stunned silence. Mara's mouth hung open slightly, and me? I stood there blinking, breathing, completely unprepared for the storm of emotion inside me. Anger, hope, fear, longing, all crashing against each other like waves. Nico handed the mic back, stepped off the platform, and didn't look at anyone else, just me. As he walked toward me, my heart pounded so loudly I was sure people could hear it, but I didn't move, not away, not toward. I just stayed. And when he reached me, he stopped. I meant it, he said quietly. All of it. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the woman who'd been left behind. I felt like the person someone was finally willing to fight for. We didn't kiss, not that night after his speech. After every eye in the room turned toward me and the whispering swelled like a tide around us, I didn't fall into his arms or throw caution into the wind. That's not how real life works. Instead, I walked with him out into the vineyard, past the noise, past the stairs. We sat on a low stone wall beneath a swaying string of lights, and I asked him everything I'd carried for over a decade. Why didn't you try harder? Why now? How do I know this isn't just nostalgia in a tux? To his credit, Nico answered all of it quietly, honestly, without flinching. He told me about the years he spent distracting himself. Jobs, short relationships, cities that never felt like home. He told me about the therapy, the regrets, the night he ran into Caleb again at a conference and saw my name on a family group photo in his phone. He told me that he'd been afraid for years that I hated him, but what scared him more was the thought that I didn't think of him at all. He didn't ask for anything in return. Not even forgiveness, just the space to speak, to own it. And in that space, something shifted. I didn't let go of my pain that night. It had been stitched into me slowly over time, and healing would be no different. But for the first time in years, I felt like I didn't have to carry it alone. We talked for over an hour until the music faded and the lights flickered off one by one. Then he walked me to my car and said, "I'm not expecting anything, but if you ever want to see what this could look like now, not who we were, but who we are, I'll be around." I nodded. We'll see. That was it, no grand finale. No cinematic kiss under the stars, but it was something. 3 weeks later, I got a package in the mail. No return address, just my name and his handwriting. Inside was a copy of The Little Prince, our favorite book from high school, the one we used to quote back and forth during study hall. Inside, on the first page, he'd written, "What is essential is invisible to the eye, and sometimes we have to grow up to understand what we felt when we were young. Nico." I smiled for the first time in days. We met for coffee the next week, then again for a walk. No expectations, just the slow rediscovery of something that had never really disappeared, only paused. At Mara's actual wedding, 2 months later, she made a point not to call me the single one. She didn't need to. I think my presence said enough. I brought Nico with me, not as a statement, not as revenge, just as someone who had earned the right to be there. My mom didn't say anything at first, but after dessert, she leaned over and said, "He seems different." "He is," I said. "So am I." "And Ivy?" She just winked at me from across the room. This story isn't a fairy tale. It's not about a girl who waited years and finally got her prince. It's about someone who hurt, who healed, and who let the past come knocking, but only after learning how to stand in her own truth first. Nico wasn't the ending I was looking for. He was the beginning I didn't know I deserved. As I sat there at that wedding with laughter all around me and a warm hand resting lightly over mine, I realized something. I hadn't failed to move on. I'd just been waiting to move forward on my own terms in my own time when it finally felt right. Because love isn't always about timing. Sometimes it's about courage, and this time I had both. So that's what happened at the wedding. I walked in expecting to be another name on a seating chart, and somehow left with the door open to something I thought was long gone. Maybe you've been there too, labeled, dismissed, told you haven't moved on fast enough. Maybe someone wrote your story before you even had the chance to live it. If that's you, I hope this reminded you that your story doesn't end when someone leaves. Sometimes it's just beginning. And if this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of a moment, a person, or even just a piece of yourself, please give it a like so more people can find it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, maybe a friend who's been stuck in the past or someone wondering if second chances ever really happen. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have walked away or listened? Finally, if stories like this speak to you, make sure you subscribe to the channel.